Stranded Americans of both sexes used to go skylarking in this pint-sized plane. It was as easy to run as a flivver. You could take off and land on a dime. It was ideal for a Sunday picnic with the crowd. That was before Hitler and Tojo started cooking. Now this plane has become America's mightiest midget. Our boys in the Pacific jungles call it the Flying Jeep. In Italy, they call it the Grasshopper. The Germans gunning at them from the hills call it the Hellraiser. It's a Hellraiser without armament. You could punch a hole through the fuselage with your fist. It's no fort or Liberator, but when Hitler's boys spot it, they start ducking. They know this small fry puzzle jumper can direct a deadly barrage of artillery fire with pinpoint accuracy. Hovering without protection over enemy gun positions, flashing the range down to our artillery teams miles away. That's the hell-raising job of these Grasshoppers. Perilous for the Grasshopper pilots? Damaging to the tiny planes? Yes, but they're vital. Without them, our advance on all fronts would have been harder. More lives would have been lost. They're the controlling mites that give a precision to our war weapons equal to the precision with which our workers forge them at home. They're the Grasshoppers that make the American eagle scream.
There aren't many of these babies left anymore. They're just about as rare now as the old Gatling gun. But they started something all right. A revolution, in fact. At least a revolutionary idea. And the idea simply was this. In an age of bigness and speed, not everything has to be big. And if you make all the machines go as fast as technology will permit, you may be outdistancing the man who still has to carry the main burden of ground combat. The guy with the rifle in his hands. This idea was the real beginning of Army aviation. It became more than an idea. It became part of the military philosophy of this nation. In 1947, when Congress passed the National Security Act defining the missions of the three services. In that act, it was specified that the Army would have such aviation as would be organic to the Army's mission, which is defined as prompt and sustained combat incident to operations on land.
The United States Army has a new and radical little plane, too. Designed to go wherever ground troops can go, it needs remarkably little space to take off. And it climbs like a shot. Carrying pilot and an observer or cameraman, the ship is highly maneuverable and invaluable for reconnaissance. Capable of landing on almost any field, the tiny plane can turn around and get back in the air in a flash. The infantry's newest sky soldier.
A Grasshopper plane takes off on Bougainville in the South Pacific for a liaison mission against the Japanese, who still hold part of the island. Fighting on difficult terrain, the American ground forces are greatly aided by these light, maneuverable planes that can fly at treetop height and at very low speed. Japanese positions are sighted. The plane radios the ground forces, and artillery is brought into firing position. With enemy resistance softened by the bombardment, United States Fiji scouts land near the Java River. The Grasshopper flies overhead as our forces progress toward a cleanup of the isolated but still resistant Japanese on Bougainville.
Among Among the pace setters in small planes that suggest a busy future for the aircraft industry is the Air Coupe, reported so easy to operate that youngsters are flying them after only a few hours of instruction. You can almost hear them now asking Dad, "Mind if I take the plane tonight? I've got a date in Texas, but I'll be home early." Another small plane making current history is the handy Piper Cub. Here the Piper Cub is shown being prepared for a takeoff from the deck of a standard length LST. Flying from such landing boats, they have proved of great use in spotting enemy beach positions and in observing gunfire. In these wartime operations, it doesn't take an expert to see great new developments in the peacetime application of such planes, creating a demand that promises to keep the workers of the aircraft industry pretty busy for some time to come.
Flood conditions caused by torrential rains along a sector of the Western Allied battle line. This waterlogged highway is a main supply route and one of many roads along the 3rd and 7th Army fronts affected by late fall rains. It's the time of the great drives for Metz and Strasbourg. The flooded Moselle River inundates the countryside at Cavis on the 3rd Army front, submerging planes used to fly blood plasma and medical supplies to forward areas. The stream rose overnight, expanding its width from 50 to 1,500 yards. It's not known if the sudden rise was due to the heavy rainfall or demolition of a dam upstream. Air Force films of an airborne hospital which solved one problem of the Leyte campaign. A field station is set up at Manarawat, Leyte by parachuting a medical team and equipment into the jungle. Skilled surgeons, surgical assistants, delicate instruments, anesthetics, medicine, and plasma are dropped in to help units which have fought through the jungle beyond the reach of overland supply. The hospital was established to service the 1st and 3rd Battalions of the 511th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Both C-47s and small Liaison planes are used for dropping the equipment and personnel. Stacking ammunition brought in for the front lines. Preparations are made for a trip into the jungle where the fighting is going on. Ammunition and rations are included along with the medical supplies. Purpose is to bring out wounded for hospitalization. Native animals are used to cover the rough jungle terrain. As soon as an adequate airstrip is cut out, the L-4 and L-5 Liaison planes are used to bring in vital medical supplies and take out badly wounded patients. A valuable supply of blood plasma is brought in for the jungle hospital. A group of wounded being brought back from the front. Some of the less seriously wounded ride in on Carabao. A patient is helped into the hospital camp. Preparing to operate. As many as 70 patients a day are cared for at this jungle station. Many of the wounded require emergency treatment and would be unable to survive if they had to wait for care until reaching the base hospital. After the more serious cases have been given emergency treatment, they are evacuated by air with an improvised litter installed in an L-4 plane. The battle for Frankfurt on the Main. Elements of the 6th Armored Division approached the one remaining bridge into Germany's 9th largest city. Weakened by repeated shellings, the span is impassable for heavy armor. The 3rd Army tanks hold the bridge approach while infantry troops try to get across. Facing them is small arms fire and bazookas along with an artillery barrage from enemy points along the Main River. The Autobahn in this area is used as an airstrip by liaison pilots of the field artillery. Normal traffic is not interfered with. In addition to the main upper section of the superhighway, American motorized equipment moves toward the front along the underpass. Employing the largest concentrations of armor in 1st Army operations, General Hodge's far-ranging columns spread out eastward on express highways, once the pride of Hitler Germany. In an Allied plan to isolate the Ruhr, the 3rd Armored Division swings north for a junction with 9th Army troops. Moving at great speed, the 3rd Armored spearheads toward Paderborn, 100 miles northeast of Cologne. The 104th Infantry Division under Major General Terry Allen also participates in this action. The commander of the 3rd Armored, Major General Maurice Rose, is killed near Paderborn on 30th March. Woods and hills south of Paderborn are cleared before the town is entered. The attack on Gießen, just west of the Autobahn, which runs from Frankfurt to Leipzig. The 7th Armored Division takes the town. It is in this area that 1,200 American, English, Russian, and Polish prisoners of war are liberated on 28th March. Originally held at Limburg, they were being moved back when our troops cut off their captors. Wetzlar, Germany. Further extending its hold on the Lahn River, the 7th Armored enters this city adjacent to Gießen on 29th March. Major General Robert Hasbrook's troops take many prisoners in the still burning town. 14 days in the service, this Nazi had seen only 2 hours of action when captured. Freed slave laborers of all nationalities leave Wetzlar. The Ernst Leitz Optical Works, home of the Leica camera. Town after town is seized by the 7th Armored. Rossberg, Diekenbach, and Gontershausen, all in an area 15 miles northeast of Gießen, are taken in rapid succession. The tanks speed on past the smoke and flames. The armor moves forward at a pace that permits only preliminary clearance by motorized infantry, and later complete mopping up by infantry on foot. The 7th Armored Division advances 96 miles in 5 days, reducing all opposition in its path.
The war with Japan was not limited to the battles on Pacific Islands. On the Asiatic mainland, the struggle against the warriors of Imperial Japan was fought on some of the most difficult terrain in the world. In late December, at a small clearing in northern Burma, General Vinegar Joe Stilwell returned to lead the forces back to the territory from which he had retreated a year and a half earlier. In this drive, Stilwell had under his command 2 American-trained Chinese divisions, the 22nd and the 38th. The campaign to take Myitkyina was waged by a force of men fighting against overpowering odds. The Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army at the time, General George Marshall, summed it up in his war reports.
The mission that the Joint Chiefs of Staff had given General Stilwell in Asia was one of the most difficult of the war. He was out at the end of the thinnest supply line of all. He could have only what was left. He had a most difficult physical problem of great distances, almost impassable terrain, widespread disease, and unfavorable climate. He faced an extremely difficult political problem, and his purely military problem of opposing large numbers of enemy with few resources was unmatched in any theater.
In his drive back, General Stilwell was accompanied by another celebrated figure, one of the small force of men who had made the memorable retreat, Dr. Gordon Seagrave, the famed Burma surgeon.
They're the controlling mights that give a precision to our war weapons equal to the precision with which our workers forge them at home. They're the grasshoppers that make the American eagle scream.
The rest of us who stayed on Angar had our own job to finish. The jungle was still lousy with Jap snipers, but we couldn't wait to clean them out to get the airstrip in. With a rifle covering every couple of axes, the aviation engineers started hacking out the strip. The sooner it's in, the sooner we can use it as a base to plaster the rest of the palaus. Not quite right for a B-29 yet, but recon planes could start to use it, and did. That island way in the background is Peleliu, where our 321st was battling Japs. Angar was ours, but not quite.
The size of the aircraft helped, not hindered the different calls for delivery. A small aircraft could use landing areas impossible for use by larger aircraft. One of the great accomplishments of the little Cub was the ferrying of wounded from isolated outposts. Flying over jungle or water.
That was the end of all real resistance on Angar, and the end of our first fight. It had been no cinch. They'd poured everything they'd had on us, from 75s down. But we'd won our first battle, and we had a right now to call ourselves the 81st Wildcats. When you watched those guys come out, you realized something you hadn't known. How mad you got when the bastards hit the guy next to you. Colonel Venable, our regimental commander, was hit by that 75. With the rest of our officers, he'd been right up there with us. From the top down, the 81st had gone in and come out all right.
These are the faces of men who fight. These are the tired faces of men who have seen death. These are the faces of men from your own hometown who carried the flag of America a step nearer to Tokyo. Look at these faces. Here's the boy who sold you gasoline on a Sunday afternoon. Here is an American boy. Looks tired, doesn't he? He is. Here's the boy who came calling on Saturday evening and took your daughter to a movie. Here's the boy that everyone predicted would make All-American when he went to the State University. But he didn't go. These men don't like war. But the enemy must be met and destroyed wherever he can be found. They know that. And so do you. Are you doing everything you can to help them? Are you buying war bonds? Bonds that pay for the weapons with which they fight? Bonds that provide places for them to rest and hospitals in which their wounds may heal. Are you buying war bonds to the limit of your ability to ensure that a strong and worthwhile America will be waiting when these men return?